I hate to say this, I'm an Alien vs Predator guy. I think that's like its own subgenre. I think it's like Alien vs Predator, Star Trek, Star Wars.
It's the triumvirate.
That's like the triumvirate, and I'm
you know
definitely
what?
the Alien
You know
Predator
what?
guy.
Everyone's always on 2.
Everyone's always on 2.
They
That's
always
how
have to
I
be on
believe.
2. I am on Star Wars and Alien vs Predator.
That's right.
I don't think Star Trek.
Exactly.
Anyway, we're back for another chat. We're gonna be chatting about some more stuff.
Time is convoluted.
Time is convoluted. It's all around. Welcome back to From the Vault. I am Dylan,
and I'm Trent.
And behind the scenes we have the lovely Connor.
Howdy ho.
And today we're gonna talk about a really cool game that I got to play some of. I have thoughts about it. But I got to play
all about.
Which you will hear all about. But it's a game that I had a chance to demo down at PAX, and that is Star Wars Unlimited.
It's already in its unlimited run.
It's already in its unlimited run.
Star Wars Unlimited is going to kill all the big card games.
Connor.
That's the hot and spicy take.
Connor.
That's the biggest take I've seen.
My sweet summer child.
Honestly.
Let me tell you about Star Wars Unlimited. I got to play Star Wars Unlimited down at PAX. You know what? It's actually really fun.
It looked you did seem like you enjoyed it.
It is an enjoyable game. Star Wars Unlimited, for those who haven't seen it, Star Wars Unlimited, it if you've played Hearthstone, you kind of have a feel for it. Star Wars Unlimited, the way the game works is it feels like a Fantasy Flight card game, right? You have an action economy where I will take an action, and then you take an action, and then I take an action, and then you take an action. Like that Fantasy Flight, it's back and forth. There's not a lot of downtime, right? The possible actions you can do are like play a unit from your hand into one of the fields of battle, or play a card from your hand, or attack with a readied unit that is a unit that's untapped. Ooh, I said it.
No, we don't mean that.
Sorry.
It's
to use an action on a creature. Some creatures might have abilities that allow them to exhaust. I didn't say it. Allow it to exhaust and have like action as a cost, right? And you can use that as an action, or you can perform an epic action, which is usually what you do to put your leader into play.
It's a bit like Keyforge in that respect, where the way you're activating. Obviously,
yeah. And there's no reactions either, so there's no like reaction system yet. I say yet because it's a card game and there are sets planned for it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some future where we do see reactions. Yes, that's the first set.
Is that my boy?
That's your boy Thrawn on the right there.
Oh, it's Thrawn,
and that's my boy Chewie.
Chewie.
Actually, the Chewie card is awesome as hell. So let me explain the battlefield, right?
Chewie's awesome in Legion too.
So in the game, you basically choose a base as your, like, it's your health total, and it gives you some kind of like restrictions, or it might give you some abilities or whatever.
Cool.
You then choose your leader, which is based around your base as well. So if your base is an Imperial base, you have to pick an Imperial leader.
Do you remember Magic the Gathering Vanguards? Like the card type Vanguard back in the day?
Shit.
Yeah, that reminds me of Vanguard. Sorry.
Wow. But yeah, you get a leader who has a landscape side that kind of like has an ability, and then a thing that denotes when to do its epic action. Its epic action allows it to be readied and put in its portrait side onto the field of battle that it fits in, because your creatures are played into 2 fields of battle. There is a space field and there is a ground field.
All right. Okay.
Space units.
Battlefront 2, baby.
Space units can attack space units. So it's like that Hearthstone creature-to-creature combat. And they deal damage to each other. They fight. Or space units can attack base. Ground units can attack ground units. Ground units can attack base, right? And like Hearthstone, you can just go face if you want to just hit the enemy life total to bring it down, and then leave their creatures on the board. Obviously, you're going to get screwed by that, because those creatures are going to ready up on the next turn and they're going to damage you, right?
And can you only attack ready, like exhausted units?
No, you can just attack. You can attack whatever you want.
Cool. Because that's, I think in Hearthstone, right, it's you... Or maybe no, so that was in WoW TCG. In WoW TCG, you could only attack exhausted units.
Yes.
No,
this you can attack whatever.
Cool.
The reason why that's important is because someone like Chewie has an ability that when he is the target of attack, he readies.
Cool.
And also he has an ability called Sentinel, which means units on this field of battle must attack him if able.
That's very
Sorry, they can only attack him if they are
choose to attack him.
Because
but that includes your base, as in they can't attack your base.
They can't attack your base, they have to attack him.
Oh,
so you put him down, and when you bring a creature in, you pay the resources, which are like these face down cards. That every turn, at the end of each turn, when you draw 2 cards, you can choose to put 1 card out of your hand face down as a new resource for the next turn. So you're always having this really cool like curve on your resources as well. Again, like Hearthstone, You know, there's a little bit of strategy on it. It's like, am I really going to repair my base, or do I want the extra resource to try and get Luke out? I'll take the resource.
Tactical.
Yeah, so there's a bit of like tactical depth to it as well. But yeah, Chewie enters tapped, and then he gets targeted. He untaps. Sorry, exhausted, and he readies, and then he attacks.
We know. We get it. We get it. We're going to say
and then he
untap.
attacks.
We're
And then he
Magic
attacks
players.
the enemy base and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool. A lot of the creatures seem to have. Sorry, a lot of the units have on attack abilities, which gives you an incentive to attack. They have when played, they have abilities as well. A couple of the other actions you can do are like pass, so you can choose to not do anything on your turn. The catch being, if your opponent passes as well, turn ends, end of turn system happens.
Okay, interesting.
If your opponent does something though, usually it goes back to your turn, and you can now do an action. So like unlike other times where I've seen passes come in where you would just pass and that's the end of your turn, and you wait for your opponent to finish. No, you can still jump in on this.
Yeah.
The only time that your turn will end before your opponent's does is if
passes.
if you seize the initiative. So if you seize the initiative, which means you take the marker to go first on the next turn, you automatically pass all future actions for that turn.
So it's like you're kind of sacrificing the rest of your turn to take this first turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you get the first turn on the next turn, right? And then at the end of the turn, you ready everything.
It's like losing
draw
a
two
round in
cards.
God tier.
Yes. Yeah.
I sacrifice victory points to go first in the next round.
Yeah.
See? Tactical.
So then you draw two cards. You ready? Draw two cards. Put something down as a resource. Start playing with the initial marker again.
Okay.
So it goes pretty back and forth. There's a bit of swings to it. It's very like, because that 2 fields of battle, like Hearthstone with 2 fields of battle, like creates a whole new like gameplay level. Like it is so much more tactical. And then you got to also think about like, is that TIE fighter really going to be an issue?
Well, it doesn't have shields.
It doesn't have shields, but you know, it does 3 damage. But it only takes 1 to hit. But if you attack
That's an elite pilot.
if you attack this thing, I don't believe damage rolls over. So
You're kind of like sacrificing.
you're sacrificing extra damage, and most times, most of the units I played with only had like 3 health. So if you're seeing there with Stormtrooper, that's a 3/1. Oh man, like I can hit the Stormtrooper, but I'm gonna get faced and lose my guy for it.
Well, not by the Stormtrooper.
Well, they deal damage to each other, right? So
if you're gonna get faced. Sorry, I thought you meant like
yeah.
hit to the
Sorry.
face,
Yeah.
sorry.
My unit's
gonna
gonna
trade
get.
with the
I'm gonna
Stormtrooper.
trade with the Stormtrooper.
Yeah.
And I've wasted 2 points of damage or 1 point of damage that could have gone on that base. Oh, but
And that's the thing, right? And also, then it's like if my opponent makes the decision to kill the X with their Stormtrooper, if they make that decision, then I might as well not have done that because I got some face and then they had to make that decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like if I make that decision, I'm opening up more options for them. If I don't do that, I go face, they then have to make that decision. Now, if they do that, it's probably beneficial to them, right? Because they've chosen to do that, but at least I haven't done this thing that's beneficial to them for them.
Yeah, or then they just choose to hit your face now too.
But then you're going even, right? Then
You're going even, but like
you might
if they have a whole bunch of 3/1s that only cost them 2 resources, and you're dropping down like a 3/2 or even a 2/3 that costs you 3 or 4 resources because it does something cool on entry. You're like,
well, hopefully that entry thing's really good then.
Yeah, and something on attack.
Feels like their 3/1s are pretty good.
C3PO. They do something really cool, but you're kind of like you're going to lose that resource battle if you're playing against the Empire that has all these cheap, really powerful guys with no defense. So yeah, there's that element of like putting that strategy, which brings me to one of the very interesting things I found while playing the game. Is there seems to be an unwritten element of deception or subterfuge to how the game is played, because like I would argue that there is a benefit walking into this game playing Commander, because in a 4-player game of Magic, sequencing is a very important step to take. At what point do I play this thing? What point do I stack this ability for maximum effect, right? And how does that play through in these options of what my opponent's playing back at me as well, right?
And also in like a first layer thinking as well, there's also like just multiple lanes of play.
Yeah.
Again, if you have a space and a ground, right, that's in Commander, your multiple lanes of play are like 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
So you're always thinking about how these kind of lanes of play happen in priority order. This
And
is a little bit different, but these 2 lanes of play, that kind of trains you for that.
Yeah,
almost.
and then you've got the like, do I attack with this thing, or do I spend the mana to give it ability to make it better, or do I want to attack with it now and wait for them to play something and then I'll pump it? all these different kind of like layers that you learn through playing Commander. Well, guess what? That's present in Star Wars Unlimited.
Well, Star Wars is pretty cool.
Star Wars is pretty cool. And there's no reaction system either. So this kind of sequencing thing is, an experienced player will see this coming. Like, it'll be telegraphed, right? Because you can see when someone's playing around over here and, hey, there's just Luke over here just giving things shield, which eliminates all possible damage from an attack. So shield tokens are really important.
Barrier, baby.
Yeah. Oh, it's essentially shield tokens from Magic as well. Like, any amount of damage removes a shield token. But because of that inherent subterfuge, I have concerns.
Divine Shield in Hearthstone? Divine Shield? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, Divine Shield, yeah. I have concerns about that in a community-based setting, particularly as the game's taking off. Now, do I think that there is an element of the store's responsibility in that? Yes.
I definitely agree.
I definitely agree that there is. Am I going to be able to quickly determine that? Like, determine who I should and shouldn't, like, push into this game or play within this game? No. It's a gamble.
I also think that, like, let's also be fair that, like, if your greatest concern of the game is that people will play it well and they'll be tactically gaining the advantage over others because of the nature of the game's, like, competitive kind of design, that seems like kind of a good problem to have, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But especially coming from this discussion of Lorcana, where we go, look at these nonsense crap.
Yeah.
This feels like a good problem to have, where it's like, I agree it's a problem in the sense of what you're saying. I agree with your grievances in that respect. But it's a good problem to have. It's like saying, well, the game is, like, not solvable, right? But the game is deep enough that if you commit to it, you'll get so good at it that maybe other people won't be able to deal with you, right? Now, as a person who's played a lot of different formats of Magic the Gathering, a lot of different, like, 16 years of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, and I haven't played this game, so I'm gonna, like, hold my judgment until I play it. I also, currently in a vacuum, I kind of disagree that having a lack of interaction at an instant speed capacity is making it less, like, beginner friendly. I think
no, that's not the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make is it makes it harder with the lack of reactions. It makes it harder to respond if you miss that subterfuge. If you miss that misdirection.
Sure,
right?
But the misdirection is, as you also landed on, right? It's easier to misdirect people who are learning. It's harder to misdirect people who are committed to the game.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It seems like a punishing system, right? Where maybe as a more competitive player, or at least a more enfranchised player, you may realize that the dominoes are falling earlier than the next player. And you might go, okay, well, I know what's happening here. I know that I'm going to win or that I'm going to lose further than I know how to win or how to lose. Maybe that's close to what you're saying. Where it's I can see the result of this game early in. And I think, those competitive players will also, and this goes into a lot of card games, right? And this is without an interactive element with the reactions. Without that, it's easy to kind of go, all right, scoop, let's go next game.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I brought up in the article that's down below. Is that big thing as well is there's a problem where I believe that newer players will not see that the game is over, and the game it can take a few back and forths before you actually are able to land that game-winning hit. It might even take another turn before you actually do enough damage to kill your opponent and then remove them from the game, because the nature of the resource system and the back-to-back action, the back and forth actions means that, if you do like 12 damage in a single turn, holy shit, that's great. Like that's amazing. So, and we're talking about a third of the life total almost, a little bit over a third of the life total. So my concern doesn't necessarily lie in skill issue lol, because that exists in every card game. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
That exists in every card game. My concern is that casual players being... my concern mainly rests in the amount of investment that a store has to make in a community to ensure that the community built around this game does allow for new players and casual players to enjoy their experience learning the game.
Yeah, so you see like a world where, because I know that the game is over in 2 turns, because I'm good at the game, you go to play your turn, I'm like, nah, dude, it's over, you should pack it up.
Yeah.
As in, as the competitive player or the more franchise player, I go, no, look, do you want to go next? Because here's what happens in 2 turns and you lose. Because I know that my opponent's not going to draw a counterspell, for example, and stop my next card. So I go, here's the dominoes. This, and this. You're good. Let's go game 2 because I don't want to engage with this game any further because I've already won it mechanically. And, if I'm a more competitively focused player, maybe I don't want to engage with you socially in the sense that my goal here is to win. My goal here is to play a game, right? So, and I agree with that. I think if that's what you're looking at, that might be true. And I think that comes back to the storefront and what we do here really well, I think, or at least what we try to do really well, is obviously malleate and form a community which is like more open to go, keep it quiet essentially and go.
Yeah, and let's explain what's going on here.
Here's, go ahead, do your turn, right? I'm not going to tell you what you could have done better necessarily immediately. I'm not going to tell you how to play the game. If you make mistakes, then it goes, okay, now it's my turn. Here's what I'm going to do. The game ends organically. I don't push you through your turns. I don't push you at the end of the game. Now the game is ended organically. I go, hey, would you like some advice on that game in case you lost, right? Or even if you won, hey, I saw a play earlier. Would you like some advice? I've been playing for the last 8 months compared to your second game.
Yep.
And then they say, they had the opportunity to go, yeah, absolutely. What did you think? Or they go, no, that's all right. And I go, cool. All right, have a good night, man. Like that kind of stuff. I think that's where it kind of works, right?
There's also a part to it as well where on the newer players' side of it, because they think that there's an out when there probably isn't in their deck. Like I want to preface this by saying I played the demo decks, which I believe are the Luke and Vader starter decks, Spark of Rebellion starter set. So I should say that my experience is not the full deck experience. It's not the full constructed experience. It's not the full set experience. It's just 2, I think, 50 or 60 card decks that you get as a starter set, right, to learn the game.
Yeah.
So obviously these decks are going to be designed to be less mechanically intensive.
And have a good matchup by definition.
Right? The big concern I have is that when I was playing this game, I saw the end. When I built up my last turn and I saw where this was going and I had my full sequence mapped out in my head and I saw what the possible responses are from my opponent, and was able to make a pretty solid guess based on the 2 cards left in his hand, about how this turn was going to play out. The problem I had was, because it's a 1-to-1 action system, I do something, and now your opponent's going to do something. Is it going to mess with your plan? It didn't. It's likely not to. If you're able to see this coming, it's unlikely to. So the problem is that my opponent, like, I can sit there and go, I think this game is going to end this turn. This is how I can see it happening. The catch being that if I explain that to my opponent, I mean, maybe he figures it out.
Why? That's what I'm saying to you, right? Like, sorry.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying to you. But if you see that coming,
yep.
What gain do you have by explaining it to your opponent? What do you gain from this?
Exactly. You don't really gain anything apart from just winning the game, right?
Well,
but
you didn't gain that though. But you didn't gain that, right?
No.
Because if you hadn't have told him what was happening and you didn't know it was going to be game over and he did the plays he was going to play and then you play your plays as you said, you telegraphed the whole thing.
Yep.
Like giving you the credit.
Well, I misdirected it, but
sure. But giving you the credit where it's due, you knew you were going to win and then you won. And if you told him versus didn't tell him, you won. So you didn't gain that by doing that. You already had that. So I don't feel like you gain anything from telling your opponent the game's over.
Well, my problem was when I got to, I think I did like a total of 6 actions on that turn to get to the game-winning state. There were 3 actions that had finally, like, it came apparent to the opponent that they were going to lose this turn. And that opponent was, credit to him, he was kind of like having a good time and having fun, but there were elements I could read from his body language that there were elements of frustration. And for me, that big thing is when you get to that point, particularly as a newer player, you're not going to go, oh, cool, pack it up game 2. Like, as a newer player, you can see them trying to find that out and trying to say, oh, well, if I just get this card, or if I just do this action, or if they mess up this action, or if they just do this, right? And that's an experience thing, obviously. As you get more experience in the game, you're unlikely to make those sequencing errors and get those wins. And then, the reputation in the community is that, well, Trent doesn't make those sequencing errors. So you can be pretty comfortable in saying that when we look at a game-winning state where if Trent makes all the right sequences and I do the best that I can, Trent's still going to win. I'm going to go scoop. Let's play your next game. But a new player is going to grow more and more frustrated of, oh, I'm losing. There has to be a way for me to get out of this, because they don't see that end. They don't see that end. They see the damage incrementally happening that will ultimately lead to the end. And because this isn't like I'm dealing 12 damage in a single action. I'm dealing this 12 damage over three activations that like, from my perspective, I've seen people drop games for less in a frustration perspective.
I agree, and that's what I think is an important point of like almost like mileage being varied, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like from my perspective, what I see, right, when I look at that kind of frustration and I go, what translates the frustration from in a game I'm frustrated to I am now frustrated with this whole game is consistency, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm finding that no matter what I do against you, I'm losing every game against you, I'm going to drop it pretty quickly. In the sense of the grand scheme of quickly by itself, by the way, is a very subjective thing because quickly is different to different people, right? But I go, if I find myself unable to beat you every game and I'm playing the same deck or a different deck or whatever, we're playing this and I'm going to get into a quick discussion as well, but we're playing this starter set together and I play Luke or I play Vader, doesn't matter. I'm losing to you every game because you're just a better player than I am. Then I'm going to go, I don't want to play this anymore, right? But the benefits of community is that I can go and play with Connor and then I might be able to beat Connor every so often. And then eventually you're like, hey dude, we don't really play together anymore. Do you want to have another game? And I'm like, yeah, I can do this. If I verse you again and you beat me again, I'm like, oh, that's not good. I'm not learning. And I maybe look it up, I find out. Now, different players do different things, right? And I agree that there's a stress that comes from building a community because not everyone is built like I am, right? I'm just built different. But
yeah, all right, Andrew Tate.
I think that not everyone is built the same way. So I think I understand that. But I'd like to say something as well, very quickly, about the context of how you've experienced the game, right?
Yeah.
I think there is actually, I like that you were landing on this kind of deceit angle, right? Because I think there's actually a deceit angle with your point here as well that maybe you don't recognize. That like, let's talk about Magic the Gathering again, right? And let's separate this identity of instant speed of reaction. Let's just separate that identity altogether, right?
Assume everything's sorcery based.
Assume everything's sorcery based. Or, well, like, assuming that having reactions doesn't affect the outcome. Let's assume that for a second. Let's just separate that point, and I can agree with that to an extent, right? We're playing together Magic the Gathering, right? We've bought the starter set for the Gandalf versus the Sauron, right? And we play together, right? We play all the time, okay? Do you think that experience is, you know what, here's a better example. I play the Sauron commander deck and you play the Riders of Rohan commander deck, right? And we play this against each other over and over again, right? Our friends buy the Galadriel deck and the other one buys the food deck, the Frodo and Sam deck. We all play together. We have a great time. Sometimes multiplayer has the element of like, you know, it's a bit easier, but the point being is that as we play more and more and more, we start to get it, right? Are we understanding the game or are we understanding the starter set design? Are we understanding the sealed format, right? Because then, if I were to take my Min Wile Illusionist deck or my Tekuthal Poison deck and bring that to the same pod, would anyone have any idea what's going on? Probably
not until you play the first game with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Now let's look at Warhammer 40,000, right? Not even a card game, okay? When everyone looked at 10th edition, right? When they first got the design of 10th edition, when all the events were showing off, Warhammer Fest happened, there were like fucking 30 tables of Tyranids versus Space Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And most of these were new models in a brand new system, right? The whole dynamic, the whole rhetoric, the rhetoric, sorry. The whole rhetoric, the whole narrative was, wow, this game is amazing. 9th edition was so full, it's so bulbous, it's so gross and competitive, and 10th just feels so smooth. The matchup feels great. Space Marines do their cool thing, they feel narratively flavored. Dude, Tyranids feel cool. I love the new Screamer Kill model. This game is awesome. And then 10th edition came out. And the whole narrative and rhetoric switched. And it was like, God, I'm so sick of 30 Desolators. Oh my God, we have to ban Eldar at events because, Wraith Knights with devastating wounds. Because what happened was people built an opinion around what was actually a very deceptive idea of the game.
True.
Because introducing those new elements that were either balanced or unbalanced and were just openly clashing into each other change the whole dynamic. Now, there is a level to understand with Warhammer, and I'm going to reflect on this now, that you're talking about 28 factions with 50 plus models each faction with all those rules. That's crazy, and I understand why this happened, which is why I think people give Warhammer so much leeway, because they're like, we kind of get it. You're building thousands upon thousands of rules that all have to gel well together, and of course they're not. So we understand to a degree. Let's roll back to Star Wars Unlimited. Do you believe that this is a real reflection, a true reflection of Star Wars Unlimited? Or do you think that you were so... Okay, you're not an enfranchised player. You're not an experienced Star Wars Unlimited player, but you could see the lines that was happening in like, what, your second game? So now, right, it's so easy to solve. Do you really believe that's a reflection of Star Wars Unlimited? Or do you think that might be more accurately a reflection of the starter
set products? Yeah. And that's why I said, like, you know, it is. I did play with the demonstration I had was with that starter deck product. So I wanted to like preface that with that saying like, hey, look, it's not a full example of what the entire set's going to look like in a constructed format.
So let me jump in with a point too. Our constructed events that we would run at Vault, our community we would build at Vault would not be a starter set environment.
No.
So by definition, stuff that we apply to the starter set environment is important. I'm not trying to disengage with anything you're saying or demean anything you're saying. It is important to justify. But does that really apply to our constructed events?
To our constructed events? No.
Right?
Not necessarily. But I do have a thing to say, though, about would that still apply to our Learn to Play events? Because this is where our main, our primary entry gateway into the game would be, where, you know, someone that plays card games would go to their friend that plays Star Wars. Hey, there's a new Star Wars card game coming out. Do you want to go try this out? You know, like that's a possible scenario. That's a likely
scenario.
That's a probable scenario. And then my concern then is, you know, rather than my concern is that would just create this almost like attrition for us, where, you know, we invest the time, and in some cases, you know, we might actually end up buying. Like personally, the business may end up. The business may end up buying a couple of starter products that just sit in a box under the counter so that we can run these Learn to Play stuff, right? But the investment then becomes, you know, I guess, halved. Well, sorry. The cost is, I guess, when we go to the investment of teaching someone how to play the game, and we talk about this, based on how long this recording's gone, either earlier this episode or in the previous episode about Lorcana.
Likely the previous episode.
With that investment we make in the Learn to Play environment, are we as a business that's making that investment, are we losing out on the fact that are we losing out because that enfranchised TCG player has that sequencing experience to able to solve that card game, and that new Star Wars person that could have been a really great member of the community and a really great player of the game, we lose out on them because they grew frustrated at how that starter set experience went.
I agree. In the conversation earlier I made, right? Let me make a point here. I got 2 points here to make. The first one being a bit of a flowchart here, right? So I made that point earlier where I was saying we're playing the star set, right? And I'm losing. Yep. I'm losing. This sucks. I can't beat this guy, right? What was my next step?
Well, your step was like to swap the decks and play again.
No. We swapped the decks. I'm still losing, right? What was that step that I took?
Well, you went to play with someone else, right?
I went to play with someone else, right? Now, if I'm just playing with you at home, what is my option to do that? It is a community. It is at a store, right?
Yes.
I think that's the first step, right? Now, and I understand that's not necessarily like, oh, it's so easy, dude. Like, it's easier said than done. But here's a point I want to make, and this is where we operate very differently as business, right? I would think that through our staffing, now, we talk about this and we don't talk about it at length, but we've talked about this outside of the podcast where, you know, in the staff and the store itself needs to facilitate this by being involved with this, right? So Star Wars Limited game probably won't do very well in the store if the staff don't play it, because if nobody in the store cares about the game enough to even play it, why would you play it, right?
Yeah. And look, you know what? After my demo, I probably will play this game.
My partner is a huge Star Wars nerd. We play a lot of Magic together. I like Star Wars and I love card games, so I'll play it too.
You know what? I think Piper and I will just play it.
I think that's also true. I think you and Piper will play a lot of it. But Piper will want to play it with me at home too. And Piper will probably start beating me at this game, which is quite enjoyable. Because I'm also just different. I like losing. Anyway, so
he's just built different, folks.
Sorry. I just really enjoy that struggle. I'm a big fan of that struggle, but that's me, and I understand why it's not for everyone. Now, I think that if this is the steps you would take, right? If the staff themselves are in franchise, we would have to create an OP, not create an OP kit literally, but in the sense that we have to create a dynamic where a staff member can teach someone how to play, maybe without utilizing just the starter decks. In the sense that, like, you would have this is a thing they actually do for Warhammer, right? Within our store, I'm a huge community builder for Warhammer. I've gotten lots of people into every form of Warhammer we can. As in, I've built kill team communities. I've I've helped build Kill Team. I've built a Warcry
You built
community.
the Warcry, yeah.
I've built a Age of Sigmar community, and I've helped build our 40k community, right? And in all of this, okay, it has been me going, let me bring what I believe is a good format for us to learn with, and then we introduce more and more.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes along to the store, I would say, hey, here's the starter sets. Let's have a game back and forth, right? I'd sandbag a little bit. I'd let them build up a little bit. Maybe they win a game or two, or more importantly, they win a game.
And that's one of the reasons why we have the combat patrols available in store now, too.
Exactly. I can show them what it's like to have the advantage, to have the disadvantage, see what that's like. More importantly, though, I can go, hey, look, we run events every X at this time. If you come along like an hour earlier, I play in the event. I'm in a little bit early. I'll give you another game. We'll play a little bit spicier. And I show them what the game looks like as they progress forward very quickly. So I can catch them in that frustration and go, don't worry, that's not the game. That's just
what
this
you're experiencing
environment.
right now.
That's just this environment. Let's get you into the game and let's decide if this is what you want. And then, you've now said to yourself and to me, you've given this a red hot go. So I think that there is we need to recognize that as a staff, as community, and as a store, and as a father figure, and as or maybe like an older brother figure. We need to understand that and treat it like such, and go, we can build you up here. We can prop you up and say, we've committed to you. And then if that player then goes, and I understand also, we talk about the logistics, that costs more. That's committing more time,
that's
which
a
I also
big
understand,
investment, yeah.
right? But I don't think we have much of a choice. And I think we've had success with doing that with all the games we play, regardless of reactions or not. How would Magic the Commander have survived in the store without us as community members ourselves propping customers up? How would our Pokemon tournament survive? How would our Star Wars Shatterpoint stuff have ever survived? Where will God tier go as a tournament structure in the store if the staff can't prop people up and get them involved?
And most of the staff are playing God tier. Like, that's insane.
I think what matters.
Yeah.
And this is why I landed on earlier where I said, if the staff don't play it, who cares? It's not as simple as that. It's about propping people up and pulling them into the environment, going, again, most importantly, and this is what we love as a store and what we love as a brand, is we want to hang out with you and do things with you. And this is our medium to do so. If you like Star Wars card games, I want to play card games with you. You don't have to like Magic. If you don't like Magic, peace. All right? Let's play some Star Wars Unlimited. I want to engage with you. That's what the store is all about, that social element. So I think that the onus falls on us. And I think I also understand your grievances with the idea that it is a lot to commit to, because we understand already that we need to commit more than already we probably should. And I put that, for those who aren't watching and are listening, I put up the bold quotation marks there when I say should commit to, because I don't really necessarily think that, I think we are just doing the bare minimum as far as I'm concerned. I think committing wholeheartedly to a project is the bare minimum. Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of hobby stores out there that maybe don't look at it that way, but that's not the point. And I think Star Wars Limited will go very far. I mean, this is a licensed game too, right?
Yes,
So
and that's point number 3.
Sorry, quickly. Yeah, it's a licensed game. But,
it's a licensed game.
So yes, and that's its own problem. But again, and then how much? And that comes back to this. Maybe last episode, maybe this episode. It's like, how much a percentage is the games like control? How much of the percentage is our control? And licensed games kind of knock that quite a huge distance.
Let's talk about the licensed game here, because like in previously we were talking about Locana. It's just the license we have to worry about, right?
Of course.
There's 2 layers to this. There's the fact that, one, it's a licensed game, and like Lorcana, it'll survive precisely as long as Bob Iger and Disney decide to take a portion of the royalties that are not that don't push the game into unviability. But there's also the problem that this is being published by Fantasy Flight Games,
who have a history with Star Wars.
Who have a history more than Star Wars, my man. Let's have a look at the fine history. Connor, pull it up, my man. It's even in my article. I wrote it all down. So you just go to the Vault Games website. Let's have a look at the fun, happy...
Are you bringing up your blog?
Yeah, bring up my blog. You can read it in the blog, the article down below.
For those in the last episode who do not read Dylan's blog, you'll have your opportunity today. So I do want to say, though, that they have had history with Star Wars. That's important to mention.
They have had history. They are. You know what? We talked about Star Wars Destiny in the Lorcana stuff. About product availability.
Is Destiny FFG?
Yep.
Legion was FFG.
Yes. So that's the article there. Connor, the second one along. Go up top. Yep. That one right there. Scroll on down to the bottom. I think I picked an appropriate cover art for this point too. Unlimited power. So what do we got there?
Android did not accept the cookies.
Android Netrunner, 2012, 2016. Star Wars the card game 2012 to 2016. Warhammer 40,000 Conquest 2014 to 2016, which that ended in 2016, mid-cycle, by the way, of releases, because Fantasy Flight Games lost the entire Games Workshop license to everything, including Warhammer RPGs like Dark Heresy
and Death Watch
and Only War and all that. They lost Talisman publishing rights as well, because that is a Games Workshop game. And all the other cool little like side games that were based around Games Workshop properties like Blood Bowl Team Manager or Space Hulk Death Angel, like all these really cool little games they had running.
You know somebody was playing Blood Bowl Team Manager in the store last night?
Yeah. It's an awesome,
cool?
It's a fun game. It's a really fun game. So yeah, they lost those licenses. Game of Thrones, a card game, 2015 to 2019. Oh look, there's Star Wars Destiny's on there too. Was that 2016 to 2020? But you should note that, as we said in a previous thing about the logistics issues, it essentially died in Australia in 2018 because of the product shortages.
Ooh.
And down the bottom there, we also have another product, which isn't necessarily about licensed, but it is about competitive card games, and that is Keyforge, which lasted 2018 to 2021. Let's get real here. It didn't really survive into 2019 in Australia.
No, I liked Keyforge, but that's a good example of watching the dominoes fall.
And then it got relaunched under Ghost Galaxy Games. I should also note there's more on there too. Like, we're not even talking about Star Wars Imperial Assault, which Fantasy Flight Games did. I found out after writing this article, Fantasy Flight Games did go to Worlds, the Star Wars FFG Worlds event, and presented a slideshow and like full panel discussion about the future for Imperial Assault that included 2 new skirmish maps and skirmish missions in an OP kit, and then proceeded to drop the game within 3 months, which means they pretty much got up there on the panel and lied.
I was unfortunately one of those people who bought in heavily to Imperial Assault back in the day, and what a game. But there's a reason that in certain circles they're known as Fantasy Flake Gaming, because you lose all
and when
of
it's
that.
all laid out for you like that, you really get to see it. 4 years is pretty much the operative time for a competitive card game for Fantasy Flight Games.
Let's make it 4 good years.
Yeah. Android Netrunner, they actually lost the license to Netrunner, so the IP isn't the license there, it's the gameplay. They own Android, their own IP. Netrunner is, funnily enough, a license from Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast, because Richard Garfield created the Netrunner game, and it was originally published by Wizards of the Coast. So 4 years is pretty much the operative time for a card game under Fantasy Flight's watch.
But
that brings into question the collectible side of things.
To say as well, there are examples of this, and this is not all to do with card games. Like with Star Wars Legion is a good example. There are opportunities that they do hand those licenses over. It's not like those games necessarily will entirely die because Fantasy Flight Games does not support them any longer. If they are a considerably successful product and that license ends, it is not often, but it is. There are situations where those licenses do get moved over.
Do you have one?
Have one what?
A license that was moved over?
Like Star Wars Legion.
Star Wars Legion? Okay, Star Wars Legion happened because Atomic Mass... All right, that's the Asmodee purchasing thing.
Sure, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yes.
Okay.
Fantasy Flight game... Well, actually, you know what? Star Wars X-Wing is a very good example of another licensed product that basically ceases to exist right now. Because during the Asmodee purchasing Wild West of a couple of years back, they bought Fantasy Flight Games and they bought Atomic Mass Games. Atomic Mass Games is known for Marvel Crisis Protocol and now Star Wars Shatterpoint. As part of that purchasing stuff, Asmodee pretty much told Fantasy Flight anything that is not a card game product is going to one of the other brands under our umbrella. So all of the RPG books went to a company called Edge, which was in Europe, which was responsible for their European localization. And we've all seen how great that is with no Star Wars RPG products for the last 2 years. And all of the miniature stuff went to Atomic Mass. And it pretty much got thrown on Atomic Mass's doorstep. There has been no new product for X-Wing or Imperial Assault since that went over. Only, I think, 2 organized play kits for Imperial Assault. Star Wars Legion has seen, I think, I would argue that yes, Star Wars Legion is a game that has expanded under Atomic Mass Games.
Almost like a renaissance.
Yeah,
as starts
it
to, like,
has
really starts
completely
to,
changed how their starter sets and how their faction systems work in that. That's really great to
all
see.
for the better and with a lot of success.
Yes,
But
but
also, what about Keyforge with the being relaunched under Ghost Galaxy Games?
okay, that's being relaunched on the Ghost Galaxy Games because the guy that originally worked with Fantasy Flight Games, not Richard Garfield who designed the game, but I think it was the Fantasy Flight guy who left, one of the founders of Fantasy Flight, Christian Peterson, made Ghost Galaxy Games and bought Keyforge from Fantasy Flight Games because it was an abandoned product.
Sure. And I see this, right?
Yeah.
But while these are examples of things happening and you can bring up context around why these things happen,
Yes.
that doesn't mean that there can't be context as to why this game. Look, I opened with, I don't think it's likely. I don't think we're necessarily, I'm not saying like, oh, dude, this game's going to be fine. That's not at all what I'm saying. And I agree with I don't think that this kind of history should be looked over. I think this is, like Connor said, Fantasy Flake Games. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. I think there's a lot of history to prove this game is like, this game is already dead in the context of how this works. But if we're going to support the game and really trust the game, we have to have this mindset that success is over the horizon. Because if you take the game at success does not exist, then unless their profit margins are huge and then we just go like, well, we just want money, which is a very dangerous position to take. What is the benefit of us supporting this game in the first place?
I definitely think there's a realm to say, and I put it at the bottom of the article too. I think if we're going to go with the thought of it's 4 years, that seems to be the thing. Look, I do know that at Essen over the weekend, they put up a big slide presentation that said, hey, we've got 5 years worth of products. Set 2 is already started in pre-production. In terms of like, it's in like pre-physical production. We've got set 3 currently in design. We've got a 5-year roadmap for the products. And I understand that Fantasy Flight Games has also said that shit before, hence why I bring up the Worlds thing. So I personally think that, like I said at the end of that article, I think that we should operate as if this game is only going to last 4 years. But in saying that, I think it's going to be absolutely fun 4 years while it's here.
Sure. And I think that if maybe there's a layer where we understand this and we project this and we go like, for players getting involved with the game, this is the logic and you should be considerate of this when you involve yourselves with it. And I think that's fine. And I also think that there's layers where it's like, why I think these games have problems. So let's say in a world where the 5 years ends, the license ends, the game's over, right? Well, we can agree there's no life for it from then. And I think the reason for that is I don't even think Legion would necessarily be a dead game if it hadn't been bought out and been worked by Atomic Mass like AM. Because Legion is a hobby product first and foremost, and then it's also a game. Whereas card games are not necessarily a hobby product, the same way X-Wing and Imperial Assault aren't hobby products. They come pre-painted. They're like
Imperial Assault's unpainted, but it's all
Imperial Assault's
assembled.
unpainted?
Yeah, it's assembled, but it's unpainted.
Oh, okay, my apologies. There's
And you
layers
also
of the
got
hobby
to
for
think
Imperial
about
Assault.
too.
Then.
Imperial Assault isn't necessarily a product that has a multiplayer. It's a product that has a multiplayer skirmish component, but it generally is its descent. It's a group based RPG experience that you can kind of play 1v1 skirmishing with as well.
It has like a rule set for it, but
it
it's
has
not
a rule set
designed
for it. It can act like that. The rule system it's like D&D. You can play D&D competitively as well against each other using the dice system and all that. So it does utilize a system for that. But yeah, it's I think the big question there too is how does this affect collectability of the product? I remember we started having a discussion before Jenna, my lovely wife, said, hey, can you save that shit for the podcast?
She says that to us a lot.
But the general idea of, I would argue that if we're running on a 4-year time frame, we're running on the idea that this is a licensed product. It will have an end date, no matter when that date is. Honestly, it doesn't matter what date that date is, even if it's beyond 4 years. That genuinely hurts the collectability of the game. From my
of course.
And my argument is that there will be a cliff. There will always be a cliff on this, and it'll be exactly the day when they say we're no longer supporting this game.
And if this was a living card game, that's more acceptable. But the fact that it is a collectible card game, and I have to invest in it hate the gambling word. You're right, but
It's
when I have to gamble
yeah,
for the cards that I want, without going to the secondary market and that whole kit and caboodle, when I have to gamble for the cards that I want, it's all these games are already a gamble when they're only going to last X amount of years.
Yeah.
Now it's a double gamble.
Yep.
Made into a triple gamble because the game may fundamentally change and I don't even like it. So, and that's we landed on that point earlier. So there's multiple layers of gambling, which makes you go like, well, I'm just not going to invest in this thing.
Yeah.
I might as well see it as what it is, a starter set, and go, oh yeah, I'll buy the Luke versus Darth Vader decks and I'll play that, and then I'll do my next thing, and I'll go back to the game that isn't dead. I'll play my Magic, I'll play my Warhammer, I'll play my other game because I know for a fact that's going to keep being supported, and that supports me.
Do you think that collectability argument, though, do you think that then affects how we should promote the game as well? Like, obviously, there's the element of, do we get into the singles business with it as well? Or do we and work from a constructed side of things? Or do we just say to everyone, hey, look, if you want to have fun with this, I would recommend just doing limited.
I think that's I think if we support it primarily through a limited environment, and that is a format that this game supports well, which is another point to make. I think you're right. I think that also in the context of, do we go into like the secondary market? Do we access singles? I think that's such a strange. I think it's much easier to access a game when the ratios and the et cetera are like fundamental.
Yep.
Like getting into Magic the Gathering for singles, the game was 20 plus years old by the time I got into singles for it. That's like not hard to justify because I could do 20 years worth of math. Oh, like 8 years really in the grand scheme of what's being recorded. I like 8 years worth of math easily and go, this is what this is going to look like. I can look at what's coming out now and go, I can see what this is going to look like, and project forward. Whereas with this game, projection is nebulous. In the fact that the game could just die whenever it decides to die is also just so dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, if the ratios are really low for the cards that you need, akin to, I don't know, every game, all of a sudden it's like, well, we may not even be pushing back our money. And then if we are getting back our money, right, then it turns into the conversation of like, are we deceiving and exploiting our customers?
Yeah.
Because if somebody buys a $70 Thrawn card because he's the best card in today's meta, and the next shit thing rolls over and he gets reprinted, or the next thing rolls over and he's no longer very good and he's like $15. If the pre-order prices are jacking cards up like they do in Magic the Gathering, because they have, in Magic there's a different beast, but if the cards are jacked up in pre-order pricing and we go, here's that $70 Thrawn, and by the time he comes out 2 weeks later, wow, he's not actually as good as people thought and he's only worth like $10-15. Are we inviting people into a sphere where we're deceiving them? And it's of course something we don't want ethically, but from a business standpoint, right, very dangerous. That becomes the kind of optics again. That becomes what people see of us, which is very dangerous, very bad. So I feel like the secondary market is almost something that we would have to avoid with like almost like a 10-foot pole, in the sense that unless this game is successful in the 3-year margin, get 3 years in and we see what the game's looking like, and then they have a roadmap moving forward. A roadmap that you've already mentioned could just be full of lies anyway, because they come out 3 months later and go, look, we're just not doing it. Well, fucking whatever. You know what I mean? So I think that that's an important discussion too. And I think that it worries me a lot to look at a game that is something that you are investing realistically quite heavily in. And I tried to land on this earlier with Legion, maybe I didn't make my point clear as well, is that you don't get something out of it that feels unique and you and hobbyist. And there wasn't like an experience that went, this affects me. The experience out of it is, I played a game the way developers asked me to play it, and I made my deck that it was like kind of what I wanted to play. But again, this is true about most games where, the Thrawn card is going to have Thrawn synergies on his Thrawn base with his Imperial like Stormtroopers. You know what I'm saying? So there's a layer where I'm fitting into a mold, even if the mold is a little bit not necessarily specifically made for me. It's like a meatball shaped blob, and I curl up into it.
Cool.
So yeah, I think. Okay, I think my final point on this game, right, is that if you are correct, if what you've projected to me is the truth about the game, it's not a game I would play. But if I were to look at the game and go, this has to be successful, and this has to be long term, it's a game that I would commit to because it looks fun. It's got a great setting, and I think Star Wars is large enough to support many, many, many years of product, especially the fact that we're moving forward and accessing more and more of the kind of stuff from Star Wars that you wouldn't expect in 2023 to access, zombie stormtroopers, etc.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. So
bringing that legend shit back.
That legend shit back, and a game that goes, this is actually happening. that's important. I think that's going to mean there's a lot of product opportunities, and I think Star Wars is a big universe.
Well, the whole like ethics of collectability and secondary markets, I think that's a really good topic that we can discuss in a future episode. So,
I think absolutely.
if you want to see that, make sure you put it in the comments below. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about and have chats about. I think we should like at some point just crack open beers and talk shit
I'd be down for that.
about some other stuff. Look, that's our thoughts on Star Wars Unlimited. I think we're gonna wrap it up there. If you like what you see here on From the Vault, don't forget to click a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Get the bell and get notified every time a new video goes live here on the channel. Let us know in the comments below. Have you played a demo of Star Wars Unlimited? Are there any cards that you're really excited for? I think all the spoilers are most of the spoilers for Spark of Rebellion are now live up on the Star Wars Unlimited website. And there will be a link below as well if you're based in Australia to subscribe to the email notification for us here at Vault Games to let you know when pre-orders go live, because this game is coming out on the 8th of March next year. So looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Trent, for hanging
Dylan.
out and chatting.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Connor, for sitting through this. And I guess that's it. We'll subscribe to hear more from the Vault.
Do you have anything to add, Connor?
Yeah, you have anything to add?
Not currently.
The suspense was killing me.
It was. I really thought it was something coming.
All right.
All right.
Well, stay safe, everyone. Wash your goddamn hands. We'll catch you next time on From the Vault. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.